This story is about an alien biology class dissecting a dead human until he suddenly sits up and asks if this is the afterlife. It was supposed to be a routine lab. Professor Thulagax had barely gotten through his morning nutrient slurry when the shipment arrived. One large cryo-container, labeled in fluent galactic standard, Homo sapiens specimen, deceased, unclaimed, Class 4, educational clearance. He squinted all three eyes at the manifest, flicked his sensory whiskers in mild suspicion, then shrugged. "Leave it near the prep table," he instructed the freight droid, who answered with an emotionless beep and floated off to its next assignment. In Lab Hall 6B, a group of 23 alien students chittered, whistled, and vibrated in anticipation. Today was the day they would perform their first dissection of a human, an incredibly rare opportunity in the Intergalactic University of Biological Sciences. Most humans were too alive, too loud, or too lawyered up to end up on dissection slabs. So when the opportunity presented itself, Thulagax didn't ask questions. Among the students stood Nerb, a glistening purple Zuruli who had aced every theoretical test and had only fainted once during a mollusk vivisection. He clutched his monograph entitled Anatomy of the Bipedal Enigma, Human Variability in 9 Systems, like a shield. The class gathered around as the container's seal released with a hiss and a cloud of cold vapor spilled over the table's edge. Inside lay a man. Caucasian, middle-aged, clean-shaven except for a faint stubble, and wearing nothing but a hospital gown and an ID tag attached to his wrist with a polymer band. His arms rested at his sides, and his expression was eerily neutral. "Observe the rigidity," Thulagax announced. "Classic post-mortem positioning. See how the musculature has—" Dave sat up. Not fast, just slow enough to make it worse. His back lifted off the table like a hydraulic hatch being opened, shoulders first, then head. He blinked, coughed, then groaned with unmistakable post-nap confusion. "Is this the afterlife?" he croaked, voice dry as recycled air. "Or just another hospital with worse lighting?" 6 students shrieked. One turned transparent. Nerb dropped his textbook and screamed, "Exorcism protocol!" before swatting Dave with the monograph's spine. The impact made a wet thud. Dave blinked again. Thulagax fainted with the grace of a toppling broom. Chaos. Absolute, delicious chaos. A Trilleran student tried to dive through a wall, forgot she was semi-corporeal, and got stuck halfway. Another began confessing to her personal crimes in 3 dialects, assuming death had found her too. Dave stared at the ceiling. "Okay," he muttered, "definitely not heaven." Nerb hyperventilated in square-shaped gasps. He moved. Specimen moved. Post-death locomotion is— Wait, what if it's contagious? One brave student with suction pads for fingers approached the slab, waving a neural scanner like a dowsing rod. "No signs of necrosis. Neural activity increasing?" "I feel like I got hit by a train carrying regret," Dave grumbled, scratching his temple. In the corner, a dissection drone tried to auto-initiate but hesitated, confused by the anomaly. It turned its blades off. Eventually, Thulagax was dragged upright and propped on a rolling stool. His frills twitched like dying grass. "You're alive?" "Apparently." "Unless this is a weird side quest after death," Dave replied. He squinted at the crowd of horrified aliens. "Who are you people? Why are you all dressed like Technicolor frogs?" A few offended hisses. It took nearly an hour, 5 translation recalibrations, and a medical containment unit before the misunderstanding began to unravel. Turns out, Dave Marshall, age 42, was not dead. He was a volunteer in an experimental human stasis revival program, overseen by the Terran Medical Advance Division. The idea was to simulate clinical death, keep the subject in deep stasis for 18 standard months, and then test neural restoration techniques. He had signed up because the pay was absurdly high, and he had nothing better to do while his ex-wife went through her 3rd marriage. The problem? Galactic Spreadsheet Protocol V4. Someone, somewhere in the Transorganism Logistics Department, had misclicked. Dave's stasis file had been shifted 1 column right. marking him not as volunteer, revival pending, but deceased, unclaimed, education approved. The Intergalactic University had accepted the transfer gleefully. As for why he woke up, the classroom's standard dissection prep included a mild electric current designed to prevent nerve crystallization during incision. The moment it touched the interface node at the base of Dave's skull, intended to monitor neural functions, it rebooted his brain like a half-updated laptop. So no, they hadn't brought him back from the dead. They'd just turned him back on. In the sterile observation chamber, Dave now sat under a bioheater, wrapped in a synthetic fleece. A mug of warm, rehydrated broth steamed on the tray in front of him. "I'm cold," he said. "Your metabolic stasis phase was terminated prematurely," buzzed a medical unit. "Thermal dysregulation is expected, but more importantly, are you okay?" Dave snorted. "I woke up naked, surrounded by aliens, got hit with a textbook, and everyone screamed like I was patient zero. So yeah, peachy." Nerb stood outside the glass wall, still pale. "Should we apologize?" "You hit me," Dave said, sipping the broth, "with a hard cover." It was hard cover for exorcism effectiveness. "You're lucky I'm not litigious." He wasn't, but he wanted the kid to sweat. Outside, Professor Tuligax paced. "We must alert the Earth Consulate. This is a major bioethical breach." "And update the spreadsheet protocol," someone muttered. Dave raised a hand. "Before you go panic calling every space lawyer in the galaxy, anyone got my pants?" Half the room flinched. It would take the better part of a day to contact Earth authorities, a full tribunal to review the clerical error, and 3 medical scans to verify that Dave had suffered no lasting brain damage. But in the meantime, Dave simply leaned back, sipped broth, and muttered, "I was supposed to wake up in a lab, with people, with coffee, not get poked by frogs." Nerb cleared his throat outside the glass. "Technically, I'm not a frog." "Technically," Dave said. "You still owe me an apology and a new rib. That jab hurt." Tuligax groaned in the background, holding his temples. "This will ruin my tenure application." Dave smiled faintly. "On the bright side, you made history." The university's admin compound had a room no one used unless something had gone very, very wrong. It was sleek, soundproof, and as inviting as a surgical tray. This was where Dave now sat, wearing a loaned jumpsuit 2 sizes too large and smelling vaguely of algae. He was flanked by 2 very apologetic intern-level administrators. Both were bipedal, vaguely bat-like, and kept offering him nutrient cubes in various colors. Dave declined politely each time. "Why is everything either glowing or jiggling?" he muttered, poking one cube with a sterile stylus. "It increases bioavailability," answered the left one, who had introduced herself as Selshi. "Also, it's our cultural aesthetic. Would you prefer a beige nutrient?" "Honestly, yes, beige sounds great." Across the table, the room's holo display flickered to life. The Earth consulate representative appeared clean-cut, diplomatic, and visibly exasperated. "Dave Marshall," she began, pinching her brow. "You were supposed to be in MedLab 73A on the Terra Arc orbiting Ganymede." Dave replied, swirling his cup of beige broth, now thankfully available upon request. "Instead, I woke up with a nosebleed and a panic attack in a high school anatomy class." The representative sighed. "We're investigating how Galactic Spreadsheet Protocol V4 misfiled your cryopod. In the meantime, are you physically stable?" Dave flexed his hand. "Well, I'm ambulatory, mildly traumatized, and at least one of my kidneys has probably been insulted." "There was no scalpel contact," Selchi interjected quickly. "Just the textbook," Dave muttered. "Standard interspecies fear response," offered the other administrator, who had remained mostly silent and tense since the meeting began. "Also, you recovered remarkably well. If anything, this data could support future stasis revival techniques." "Oh, fantastic," Dave said, half laughing. "Glad I could be your unintentional proof of concept." The representative's image flickered again. "Until we can get a diplomatic transport to bring you back to Ganymede, You're under the care of the university. We're arranging proper accommodations and medical monitoring. Do you feel safe?" There was a long pause. "I feel like I should never sleep again," Dave said truthfully. "But yeah, no one's tried to dissect me since." "Good. You'll be debriefed by a Terran psychologist soon. For now, cooperate with the faculty and avoid further disruptions." The call ended. Dave looked at Shelshi. "So, where do I sleep that doesn't have scalpels?" They gave him a guest dorm in the visiting species wing. The ceiling was 4 feet too high, the mattress was made of something with a texture of foam-wrapped coral, and the toilet asked him questions before flushing. But it was private, clean, and, crucially, free of terrified undergrads. An intercom buzzed around what he guessed was local mourning. "Mr. Marshall," came Thulagax's tone, tired and cautious. "You're requested at the Department of Interstellar Biology. We would like to formally apologize and possibly ask some anatomical clarifications." Dave groaned. He'd barely started to doze. Still, it beat getting whacked with hardcover anatomy. He dressed in the spare jumpsuit, which had been upgraded with a university patch and actual socks. A guide drone escorted him to the same classroom, now completely scrubbed and free of electric prep currents. Thulagax stood near a display board showing a 3D human model. His frills were unusually stiff, and his left eye twitched when Dave entered. "Mr. Marshall," he said, "I must express my personal apologies. Our oversight has nearly led to international scandal," Dave offered. "Yes." Dave shrugged. "I've had worse Mondays." The students were seated at their workstations. A few had snuck in popcorn like snacks, which they tried to conceal behind transparent screens. Nerb sat near the front, looking like a kid about to confess to shoplifting. "Hey, Nerb," Dave said casually. "Still have that book?" It suffered damage during impact." "That's fair." Thulagax cleared his throat. "We'd like to extend an invitation for a unique educational opportunity. Given your rarity, and since we now know you're fully sentient and medically stable, would you consider offering a voluntary anatomy Q&A?" Dave blinked. "You want me to be the substitute lecturer?" Interactive education is valued across multiple species. Dave hesitated. He wasn't a doctor, or a biologist, or anything even adjacent. But if he was going to be stranded on this glitter-painted frog campus for a few days, he might as well keep busy. "Fine, but no poking, scanning, or accidental electrical curiosities." "Agreed." "So the red stuff in your veins," asked a student who resembled a sentient fan, "isn't toxic to you?" "Correct. It's blood. Oxygenated, iron-rich cells." "Fascinating," she said, typing furiously. "And when you inhale," asked the cube-shaped one, "you're converting gaseous atmosphere into metabolic fuel?" "Air," Dave confirmed. "Mostly nitrogen and oxygen. We don't eat it, we breathe it." Nerb raised a shaking tentacle. "What happens when you break a bone? Is it permanent? Are you replaced entirely?" No," Dave said. "If I break a bone, we set it in place, usually with a cast or metal pins if it's bad. Takes weeks, months sometimes." "Wait," Nerve interrupted, "you heal? Without full cellular regeneration?" "It's slow and annoying, but yeah, we heal." There was a stunned silence. Then a murmur swept through the class. "The manually? With time and rest? No osmotic skin replacement chamber? No wonder they're so paranoid." Dave smiled weakly. "We get by." Another student raised a spindly arm. "What does your liver do?" "I.e., it filters toxins, metabolizes stuff, keeps me from dying when I drink beer." "Beer? Never mind." More questions followed, and for the next 90 minutes, Dave explained everything from sweat glands to gastrointestinal distress to the entire room's disgusted fascination. When the class ended, Thulagax looked amazed. "That was the highest recorded engagement in my tenure." "Glad I could help," Dave said, half exhausted. "Do I get a grade?" "You get a complimentary meal cube of your choosing." "Great." By that evening, Dave was sitting in a courtyard made of soft glow biostone. sipping something like tea while rereading the safety instructions for stasis revival protocols. There, across from him, appeared Nerb, carrying a new copy of the monograph. "I brought this," he said sheepishly, "to replace the one I used on you." Dave took it with a grin. "Appreciate it. You always this nervous?" "It was top of my cohort until you returned. I didn't plan that." "I know," Nerb said, sitting cautiously beside him. "But still, we were taught that humans were complicated, not this." Dave chuckled. "Yeah, most of us aren't undead surprise guests." Nerb turned his gaze toward the sky, where small satellite clusters blinked above the atmosphere. "You healed, you answered questions, you didn't even get mad?" I got mildly sarcastic. "For us, that's restraint." They sat in silence a while. Then Nerb said, "Tomorrow, they want to record a full biometric scan, with your consent." Dave sighed. "Do I get pants that fit?" "Yes." "Then sure, just no more electrocutions." Nerv nodded. "I'll make a note." The next morning started, as many regrettable ones do, with a probe hovering inches from Dave's face. "Please remain still," it chirped. "I'm brushing my teeth," Dave grumbled through a mouthful of foam. "Oral hygiene detected. Adjusting scan parameters." The biometric recording session, it turned out, was a full-body, non-invasive, multi-spectrum process that required Dave to remain still inside what looked like a crystal terrarium while a dozen different scanning orbs orbited him like overzealous paparazzi. "You could at least play some music," Dave muttered. "Terrestrial music contains rhythmic patterns potentially destabilizing to Gribbon auditory nerves," came the reply from the chamber's intercom. "Sorry, that's a no." Professor Thulagax watched from behind a transparent barrier, arms folded and a look of cautious admiration spreading across his face. "Fascinating," he whispered to a fellow researcher. "His musculature lacks myomeric support, yet remains functional. No thermal conversion glands, no external neural ports. He runs entirely on biochemical inefficiency." "Like a meat engine," the assistant replied. "I heard that," Dave called out. After the scan, he was given a proper set of pants, well, proper by intergalactic standards. They were sleek, breathable, and shimmered slightly when viewed from certain angles, but they fit and didn't smell like medical foam. Progress. Back in the dormitory wing, Dave took a call from the Earth consulate liaison again. This time she looked slightly more relaxed. "We've arranged transport," she said. "You'll return to Ganymede for debriefing and follow-up in 2 days." 2? Dave raised an eyebrow. "Not sooner?" "There's only one diplomatic vessel with capacity, and you're technically not in distress anymore." "Not in distress," Dave repeated slowly. "I woke up on a slab next to scalpels." The liaison tilted her head sympathetically. "Yes, but you've since received 3 apologies and a nutrient stipend." "Fair point," he said, sighing. "And your stasis program wants a full report. This accident has highlighted issues in the galactic data infrastructure they'd very much like to see corrected." "Oh, I'm going to write a report, all right." That night, Dave couldn't sleep. Not because of the bed he'd adjusted to the firm yet floaty texture, but because his brain refused to stop replaying the moment he woke up. The electric jolt, the disorienting white light, the scream, the thwack of Nerb's textbook. The moment had seared itself into his memory like a badly recorded ringtone. He sat up and paced the small dorm. Outside the window, twin moons drifted above the university towers. In the corridor beyond, soft footsteps echoed. He poked his head out. Nerb was there, walking slowly, whispering into a datapad. "Hey," Dave called softly. Nerb froze, startled, but then approached. "You okay?" Dave asked. "I was logging a research entry. Couldn't sleep." "Say." There was an awkward pause. Then Dave asked, "Did you actually think I was undead?" Nerv blinked. "Yes, strongly." Dave rubbed his temple. "And hitting me with a book seemed like the right move?" "It was the only thing in arm's reach. And it was annotated." Dave snorted. Bet your annotations didn't include whack reanimated volunteer. They do now, Nerb said with a straight face. They ended up walking to the research garden, a place filled with oxygen-producing vines and glowing fruit used to test photosynthetic adaptations. Nerb perched on a curved bench, while Dave sat cross-legged on the opposite side. I've been studying xenoresilience for 2 cycles, Nerb said. Your species is difficult to model. You think we're weird. You have an enzyme that lets you taste radio waves. Nerb tilted his head. Doesn't everyone? No. They sat in silence for a moment before Nerb added, It's not just that you woke up. It's that you functioned, rebooted, reacclimated, without a recalibration period. Because I wasn't supposed to be dead, Dave said simply. But most species don't tolerate stasis interruption without full neural degradation. Dave stretched his arms. Guess we don't know we're supposed to fail, so we don't. That earned a thoughtful hum from Nerb, who tapped something into his datapad. The next morning, Dave was invited to the Interdepartmental Symposium on Interspecies Biology, a fancy way of saying panel discussion with snacks. His role? Live case study. It was less glamorous than advertised. He sat on a stool, tried not to sneeze during the chemical presentations, and answered a barrage of questions ranging from what is adrenaline to explain the purpose of ear hair. Midway through, a holographic projection behind him displayed his biometric scan. A 3-lunged Healy professor narrowed her eye stalks. This musculature, no embedded tech, no stabilizers? Nope, just meat and stubbornness. Extraordinary. Thulagax, seated near the front, seemed unusually proud. After the symposium, while picking at something approximating nachos, Dave was approached by a dean with a translucent skull. We'd like to offer you an honorary fellowship, the dean said, in recognition of your resilience and inadvertent educational contributions. But you want me to join the faculty? Temporarily. You're clearly informative and durable. Dave blinked. You know I'm not a scientist, right? I used to run logistics for a delivery company. Even more impressive, the dean said. Let me think about it. He thought about it all the way back to his dorm room. Teaching aliens, explaining broken bones and hangovers to a group of species that healed with light and filtered toxins through their eyelids. But it wasn't just the idea of teaching. It was how, for the first time in a while, he wasn't just coasting. He was weirdly useful. By the time he entered his dorm, the decision was forming. He sat down and composed a message to the Earth consulate. About that transport, he typed. Can we delay it? The Earth consulate liaison was not pleased. You want to stay, she said flatly, staring from the screen like a disappointed ant, after a catastrophic administrative failure nearly got you dissected? Dave sat comfortably in his dorm room, wearing his now official Intergalactic University visitor ID badge, sipping something lemony from a cup that changed color based on beverage temperature. Not forever, he said. Just a while longer. They've offered me a temporary fellowship. To do what, exactly? Teach, Dave said, shrugging. Talk. Translate human biology into something that doesn't make their brains melt. Mr. Marshall, your original agreement was for a 12-month revival trial followed by reintegration into Terran medical study. This is not standard procedure. No, but it's useful, he said, then softened his voice. And maybe it helps prevent the next guy from waking up on a slab. The liaison hesitated, then nodded slowly. We'll file the adjustment, but your participation here must remain voluntary. You're not an employee of the university, you're a representative of Earth. Dave looked around the dorm, at the folded-up scan logs and borrowed physiology books on his desk. Then let's make sure we represent well. His first official guest lecture took place in a larger auditorium, this one designed to accommodate aquatic listeners and gaseous-based life forms. Dave stood at the front with a pointer, a hollow display, and a deeply sincere hope he wouldn't pass out from stage fright. Today, he began, we're talking about human injury and recovery. A ripple of murmurs moved through the students. Now I know what you're thinking, Dave continued, pulling up a diagram of a fractured radius. That doesn't look survivable. But here's the thing, it is. It just sucks. He explained how humans realigned bones, set them in casts, and waited how weeks could pass before the healing process finished, and how physical therapy could take even longer. One student raised a spiky appendage. Why not replace the limb entirely? Because we like our original parts, Dave said. Most of us anyway, and because fixing what's broken is sort of who we are. He went on to describe concussions, organ transplants, scar tissue, and the strange combination of stubbornness and community care that pulled humans through even the ugliest recoveries. No reversion chambers, no DNA reweaving, just duct tape, painkillers, and hope. By the time he finished, the room was quiet. A few students looked vaguely horrified, others looked fascinated. When he stepped down, Tulagax was waiting near the exit. "You've become oddly effective at this. Don't sound too surprised." The professor smiled, a tiny, subtle upturn of cheek tendrils. "We've had a request from the comparative psychology department. They want to know what frustration means in humans. Apparently your last answer caused a debate." Dave chuckled. That one might take an hour. He followed Thulagax down the corridor, the conversation drifting toward lesson plans and upcoming forums. He didn't notice at first, but his gait had changed. Less cautious, less off balance, more like a man who belonged somewhere. Later that week, Dave found himself in the university cafe, a bizarre but charming fusion of sterile dining and social chaos. He sat across from Nerb, who had taken to shadowing him for extra credit. "I read your med file," Nerb said, sipping a blue, gelatinous drink. "It said you had a minor cardiac arrhythmia before stasis." "Yeah, nothing dangerous, just a funny heartbeat. Doctors said it was stress-related." "What's stress like?" Dave paused, considered, then laughed. "Like being a squirrel who knows the hawk is above but can't see it." Nerve blinked. "Squirrels are real?" "Too real." They talked for another hour about biology, Terran mythology, and the ethics of elective amputation in squid-like species. For once, it felt normal, not alien, just weird, curious, and interesting. As Dave got up to leave, Nerb stopped him. "I was scared of you, you know," Nerv said quietly. "When you woke up, I thought you were something unnatural." Dave nodded. "You weren't wrong. I wasn't supposed to wake up like that. But you did, and then you explained it, and then you made it useful." Dave offered a lopsided grin. "That's the human way." The night before his revised transport date, the new one he had personally scheduled, he sat in the research garden again. Stars shimmered above, the leaves around him swaying to a wind that didn't seem to come from anywhere. He thought about going home, about the sterile white halls of Ganymede's medical center, about contracts, scans, debriefings, and questions he couldn't answer on forms that didn't have enough boxes. Then he thought about here, the questions that hadn't been answered yet, the sheer curiosity, the way they looked at him not as a threat or a joke, but as a puzzle that made their own sense of life a little bigger. He tapped his communicator. "Consulate?" he said. "Yes. I want to extend. A little longer." Pause. "Reason?" "I've got students waiting for a lecture on inflammation and regret. They expect diagrams." Another pause. Then, "Extension granted. Report weekly. Don't get dissected." Dave smiled. "No promises." Months passed. The incident became a university case study. Protocols were rewritten. GSPv4 was scrapped in favor of a system that triple-checked life status fields before assigning educational clearance. And Dave? He became a fixture of the campus. He lectured. He advised. He occasionally dodged invites to dinner from well-meaning but very herbivorous professors. His old stasis team sent a plaque. To Dave Marshall, first accidental reboot and interstellar teaching fellow. He hung it above his desk. In the end, no one really remembered the textbook swing, except Nerb, who signed every birthday card with "Sorry about your ribs." Dave stayed exactly 7 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days. Then one day, when the semester ended and his lectures were recorded for future modules, he finally called for a return transport. He stepped aboard the shuttle carrying a duffel bag, a few strange snacks, one awkwardly designed sweater gifted by the Department of Multi-Lambed Biomechanics, and a certificate of honorary instructional merit. As the engines rumbled and the station fell away behind them, Dave looked out the viewport, watching the strange, shining towers of the university fade. He was going home, not because he had to, because he finally could.